she goes away. Anytime she goes away. Anytime she goes away.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returned from break in 9 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returned from break in 9 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returned from break in 8 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returned from break in 8 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returned from break in 7 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 7 minutes.
Stopped into a church. I passed along the way. Well, I got down on my knees and I pretended to pray. You know the preacher like to call.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returned from break in 6 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returned from break in 6 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 minutes.
I need love to ease my mind. I need to find someone to call mine. But Mama said you can't hurry love. No, you just have to wait. She said love don't come easy.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 30 seconds.
You just have to wait. You gotta trust, give it time. No matter how long it takes, but how many heartaches must I stand before I find the love to let me live again? Right now, the only thing that keeps me hanging on when I feel my strength, yeah, it's almost
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 4 minutes.
you just have to wait. She said love don't come easy. It's a game of give and take. How long must I wait? How much more can I take before loneliness will cause my heart to break? Oh, I can't bear to live my life alone. I grow impatient for love.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
These precious words keeps me hanging on. I remember Mama said, no, you just have to wait. She said, love don't come easy. It's a game of give and take. You can't hurry love. No, you just have to wait. She said, trust, give it time. No matter how
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes.
don't come easy.
Everything okay down there, Sean?
Keep on waiting.
Yes, sir.
until
Give me a 10 count, would you?
something for that
Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings on the Salem Radio Network.
Yeah, okay.
Good?
Can work with that. Yep.
keep on waiting. But it ain't easy.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
No, you just have to wait. She said, trust, give it time. No matter how long it takes, you can't hurry love. No, you just have to wait.
Oh,
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes.
Red roses too, I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Bright, blessed day, the dark, sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return in 1 minute.
I see friends shaking hands, saying how do you do.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 45 seconds.
I hear babies cry.
okay. Have a good show, everybody.
There ain't much more.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 30 seconds.
I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
He's not just a conservative voice at CNN. He's the last man standing athwart the leftist mob, delivering the fiery truth, surrounded, outnumbered, still undefeated. Fighting for free speech, Western civilization, and delivering common sense for the American people. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Scott Jennings.
Okay, we made it to Friday here on the Salem Radio Network, but I got to tell you, I am barely functioning in here. Here at the radio station, it's 50 degrees in this studio, and if you're watching on the live stream, I'm literally wearing an airplane blanket because I can barely even move my mouth. Like my jaw hinges are so cold, they will not work properly. It's freezing in here, but we're going to power through and give you common sense people here on the Salem Radio Network on the Scott Jennings Show. I want to thank my friends at Penn State University last night. We had a great debate on campus. Hundreds of people showed up. We had civil discourse. We had some disagreements, but it was a good exercise and a good reminder that we will defeat political violence and we will defeat the people who want to tear down the West and tear down America with more speech and more debate and more civil discourse. I have the tweet of the week. I think I'm going to start doing this, guys. Tweet of the week, my friend Amy Curtis, ranty Amy Curtis on X. She says, I've changed my mind on something. All the Democrat women who said their daughters have fewer rights than they did are correct. These women had the right to tell men to get out of their bathrooms. Their daughters have no such right. Truer words never spoken than by our friend of the show, Amy Curtis. Also, I highly advise you to check out the video from the Ryder Cup today. Donald J. Trump, your president, has got F-18s flying over the Ryder Cup. People are chanting USA. He's taken our golfers down to the first tee. It is a great American spectacle, and our president is right in the middle. 22 minutes past the hour today. Huge news in the New Jersey gubernatorial race. Bombshell revelations rocking the campaign of Democrat Mickey Sherrill. We've got the reporter who broke the story from the New Jersey Globe. David Wildstein will tell us about it. It has to do with academic cheating at the Naval Academy where Sherrill did attend. 33 minutes past the hour. The Viceroy himself, Mike Davis, the pride of Iowa, will be here to tee off on the Comey legal case. He'll give us the ins and outs, and he's got some predictions on what he thinks is coming next. 50 minutes past the hour, Dinesh D'Souza comes by to talk about his new film project called The Dragon's Prophecy. But first, let's get to the news. Breaking last night, as you've no doubt heard, former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted. This came down from a federal grand jury made up of ordinary American citizens. The charges, making false statements and obstruction of justice. These charges stem from Comey's testimony in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee on September 30th, 2020. He told Senator Ted Cruz that he'd authorize anyone to leak to media outlets. But according to the Department of Justice, he actually did. You can read the indictment for yourself. It's only 2 pages. It's not complicated. The indictment came down in Northern Virginia, one of the most liberal jurisdictions in America. So a group of citizens looked at this and said, yep, charges are warranted here. Now, remember, Comey is innocent until proven guilty. He gets to go before a judge and a jury. The charges and prosecutors must stand up in court. They have to survive the test. As for the reaction to all of this, the weeping and gnashing of teeth from the no one is above the law crowd could be heard around the world last night. If you've looked at any news sources today, you've heard the word unprecedented thrown around endlessly, which tells me that apparently nobody knows what the definition of that word actually is. But please, spare me the outrage over political prosecutions. For all of you who ever said, no one is above the law, or said that institutions of justice are sacred and cannot be questioned, or described Donald Trump as a 34 convicted felon, you know what I say? Choke on it. Just choke on it. Honestly, if you cheered the political prosecutions of Donald Trump on cases that were clearly novel and made up just for him, just for politics, choke on it. If you are lamenting today, whoa, this was 5 years ago, and yet you cheered on the criminalization of a liaison Trump had in 2006, choke on it. If you're whining about the use of process to punish people, but you cheered the use of process to cripple Trump, the candidate, Trump, the president, and his people, choke on it. And if you're worried about revenge, let me ask you a simple question. Revenge for what? Exactly. Whatever do you mean? Please elaborate. Do tell what it looks like when the criminal justice systems are weaponized. Another word of the day, weaponized against political opponents. Listen to what a reporter on the South Lawn of the White House actually said to President Donald Trump today. Just listen to this.
President Trump, are you worried now that the next time there's a Democratic president, they will indict your FBI director or people in your administration?
That's what they tried to do, right?
Oh, my goodness gracious. To be honest, that joke is funnier than any joke Jimmy Kimmel has told in the last 10 years. Now, Trump punted the question into the sun, as he should have. A good day for the rule of law. The rule of law endures. You know who said that? James Comey, the day that Trump was indicted. No whining about political prosecutions or weaponization or whatever. That's just what he said. Choke on it, is what I think. My view is very simple. Comey was indicted for lying by a grand jury through a normal process that produces indictments for a range of crimes across this country every single day. He'll go to court and he'll get a chance to defend himself. The case seems pretty simple. We don't need CSI Alexandria here to figure out the truth. He either lied or he didn't. And the simple evidence testimony will clearly back it up, or it won't. But do not bemoan political prosecutions or whine about revenge or whatever today. Just don't. And for what it's worth, I don't hear a lot of people defending Comey on the substance of all this today. I hear fussing about all sorts of aspects of it, but is anyone out there actually defending him on the substance of the charges? I don't see much of that, which ought to tell you something. Everybody knows the DOJ, the FBI, and yes, dare I say, other elements of the deep state, leaked and still leaks like crazy against this president. You know that it happens. It was true when he started, and it is still true today. By the way, I'm not hearing enough Democrats thanking Donald Trump today. For what, you ask? I mean, is he not punishing the destructor of Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign? The dirty secret is if Hillary had won anyway, she would have fired Jim Comey on day one, and every person whining about this today would have been on TV cheering her on. Selective outrage hypocrisy, shamelessness. You're getting it all today, America. This is the Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network. Let me talk to you about my friends at Pure Talk Wireless. You know, our society only works because of the freedoms guaranteed by our First Amendment. Everyday Americans should be able to speak openly and honestly about their values without fear of retribution. That's a principle that Pure Talk proudly supports. Now, they sponsor my show, and that allows me to stand strong behind this microphone every day and share the truth with you. If you want to support brands and companies that defend freedom and are pro-America, I encourage you to switch over to Pure Talk. You get great 5G coverage on an extremely reliable and secure network. With plans from just $25 a month, you'll save a ton of money. $25.
30.
You don't have bills that are that low right now. Here's what you do. Dial pound 250 and say Scott Jennings to switch to my wireless company called Pure Talk. Do it right now. You'll get an additional 50% off your first month. Dial pound 250 and say Scott Jennings to switch to Pure Talk. Do it today. When we come back, huge breaking news out of the New Jersey gubernatorial race. You don't want to miss the scandal brewing for the Democrats there. It's for the American people. It's Scott Jennings on the Salem Radio Network.
Quelling leftist arguments with truth and common sense. They hate that. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
If I come out like a dream, will you let me show you what I mean? Will you let me come on inside?
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 4 minutes.
All I want is a remedy for all of the things that we need. Ooh, I will take a look.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Baby, why you dye your hair? Why you always keep up with your mother's hair?
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes.
Tell me, did the other children's going on you? If I come on like a dream, ooh, will you let me show you what I mean? Will you let me come
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
All I want is a remedy for all of the things that we need. I would surely take a no to please
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 1 minute and 30 seconds.
I need a remedy, yeah, for what is enemy, you see. I need a remedy for what is enemy. I need a remedy, yeah, for what's enemy.
Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return in 1 minute. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 45 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
You've heard the narratives. Now get the truth. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
It is common sense for the American people. You know, we get emails. I get messages during the show. Here's one. Is your monologue writing prompt? What can I say today to anger every terminally online, non-binary feminist in America? How did you know? Dear listener, how did you know? It's Scott Jennings on the Salem Radio. We've got a really wild thing going on in New Jersey. There's a governor's race going on there. And there's a scandal brewing with the Democrat, Mickey Sherrill. And I've got the man who broke the story, David Wildstein of the New Jersey Globe. Necessary reading if you're following politics in the Garden State. David, thanks for joining us today. Tell us what is going on with Mickey Sherrill and this cheating scandal that she was apparently involved in at the U.S. Naval Academy.
Yeah, this was the 1994 scandal. I mean, it was national headlines for months and months. Cost some senior naval officials their careers. 130 midshipmen involved. I think about 24 of them were expelled. And Mikey Sherrill was a member of that class, and now is a 4-term congresswoman. She's running for governor. It is a tight race. It's dead even in yesterday's polling, and it's now come out that she didn't walk with her class, and she told me that she didn't walk with her class because she didn't want to turn in her friends. So she's never said that she's cheated, and there's no evidence at all. No proof whatsoever that she cheated, but she was involved, and she may have violated that honor code.
So my question for you is, what is her obligation as a student at the Naval Academy if she was aware of cheating, if she was aware of unethical behavior and refused to report it? Is that effectively why she was kept out of her graduation walk ceremony?
Yeah, that's what she said. Mm-hmm. She said that she didn't want to turn in. She didn't want to be a rat. She didn't want to tell on others. And her penalty is that she couldn't walk in that ceremony. Her service was the same. She graduated that day. Her military service started that day. But her penalty is she couldn't walk with her class, which is a big deal.
Now, is she allowing any public inspection of her discipline record? What exactly do you have access to, and what is she unwilling to show you?
So all I had access to was, a very basic, the program from the commencement ceremony, and saw that her name wasn't on it. I don't have access to any military records that would show any discipline taken and what the terms were. I have asked that she voluntarily release it. Only Congresswoman Sherrill can authorize the release of her own sealed records. And so far they have declined.
So the only way to know whether she's telling the truth about this would be for her to produce the records to back it up, which she's not currently doing. So this is the centerpiece of her political story, is it not? For those who aren't in New Jersey but are now interested in the race, she's sort of made this the centerpiece of a lot of her political engagement, correct?
Yeah, it's actually the essence of her political being is that she was an Annapolis grad and a Navy helicopter pilot. She's got the helicopter incorporated in her logo as a candidate for governor. This is everything. I mean, look, I can only speak for myself. I did some dumb things when I was in college that I wouldn't want used, but I don't walk around every day saying, here are the lessons and the values that I learned at the school that I went to. I think that's where the difference is. And I'd like to see her. I mean, she's a fantastic lady. She really is. She's a dedicated public servant. She's a wonderful mom. The Globe we don't come in and take sides one way or the other, but there's a frustration point here, which is just, if there's nothing to see, then let us see a blank page.
David Wildstein is with the New Jersey Globe, which is must read if you're following politics in New Jersey, and you should be, because we have a governor's race going on there, and it is extremely close. The polls now have it effectively a dead heat. It was a pretty close election for president there in 2024, and we'll see what happens. David, thank you so much for your reporting. Thanks for coming on the Scott Jennings Show. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, the Viceroy, Mike Davis, is here to break down the case against Jim Comey and predict what will happen next on this legal case and maybe some others. It's common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings on Salem Radio Network.
Portions of the Scott Jennings Show are sponsored in part by Americans for Prosperity.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 minutes.
Run down. I've been lied to. And I don't know why I let that mean woman make me a fool. She took all my money.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 30 seconds.
Now she's with one of my good time buddies. They're drinking in some crosstown bar. Sometimes I feel. Sometimes I feel like I've been tied to the whipping post.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 4 minutes.
I feel like I'm dying.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
My friends tell me that I've been such a fool.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes.
Oh, for loving you. Drown myself in sorrow as I look at what you've done. But nothing seems to change. The bad times stay the same, and I can't run. Sometimes I feel
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Lord, I feel like I'm dying.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 1 minute and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return in 1 minute. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 45 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
Conversations and stories you simply won't hear from the mainstream media. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
Okay, common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings here. We're hoping to connect with Mike Davis of the Article 3 Project here in just a few moments and talk a little bit about the Jim Comey indictment. A little bit of other breaking news. It sounds like Sinclair has decided to put Jimmy Kimmel back on the air tonight. Sinclair is one of the network affiliate owners. I think they have about 40 ABC stations, and they had pulled Kimmel down. It sounds like they're going to put him back on the air. Maybe, I don't know if it's tonight or if they're beginning next week, but Sinclair has caved, and they'll put Kimmel back on the air. So we'll see what Nexstar, which is the other big company that was withholding Kimmel. President Trump last night announcing a bunch of new tariffs, including a 25% import tax on all heavy-duty trucks, 30% tax on imported upholstered furniture, a 50% tax on kitchen and bathroom, and a 100% tariff on any branded or patented pharmaceutical product unless the pharmaceutical company is building an American factory. President Trump signed an executive order yesterday clearing the way for TikTok to keep operating in the United States. He extended the period to work out the details, which will take about 120 days, they say. Polls are getting worse for the Democrats. Quinnipiac, latest survey, the lowest ever recorded score for the Democratic image, 30% in the Quinnipiac poll. They've been asking that question since 2008. Rough sledding for Democratic image in polls across the country. We are now joined by Mike Davis of the Article 3 Project, my old friend. We call him the Viceroy, the most fearless legal operator in Washington, D.C. Mike, I know you have thoughts. I know you have thoughts on what happened to Jim Comey. He's been indicted, and I want to first get your take on the indictment itself. I see some people saying, well, this is thin. It's going to be hard to convict him in court out there in Northern Virginia. What's your take on it?
Well, I should not be so happy when someone is indicted, Scott, but I'll be very honest with you. I am very happy that James Comey got indicted because I can't stand the guy. I think he's a sanctimonious snake. He went after General Flynn when President Trump went into office the first time, and General Flynn was the incoming national security advisor. And James Comey bragged about the fact that he sabotaged General Flynn. You and I worked in the White House together. You know, it's a tough job, and you don't need it to be tougher as a top presidential aide by having the FBI sabotaging you because the FBI director didn't like the fact that your boss won the election and not the person he preferred. And so I think this is just the beginning of James Comey's legal problems. You're going to see more investigations on Crossfire Hurricane that I've been calling for 3 years very publicly. And I think that's that case is going to be the much bigger problem for the Democrats.
I have seen some people speculating that this is what they were calling a holding indictment, that there may be other charges to be added to his case or to future cases. I'm not entirely sure what they mean. Is that something that's possible here? Is this just sort of like we're going to get this in because of the statute of limitations issue, and then we're going to hang other things on it?
Yes, and I imagine there will be a superseding indictment of James Comey in the Eastern District of Virginia. Look, the evidence is very clear, Scott. He testified in 2017 to my former boss, Chuck Grassley, on the Senate Judiciary Committee, that he wasn't behind the leaks that were undermining President Trump, and then he lied then. That's beyond the statute of limitations of 5 years, so you can't charge him for 2017. But then Ted Cruz asked him in 2020 if he stood by what he said in 2017, and James Comey clearly testified that he did. That's perjury. Those are false statements to Congress. Now, the grand jury did not charge Comey with perjury. They charged him with false statements and obstruction. They declined to bring the perjury charge, and maybe that's because of what you're getting to, Scott. You're dealing with the Eastern District of Virginia, which is the suburbs outside of Washington, D.C. This Eastern District of Virginia is not as bad as D.C. I mean, Judge Jeanine Pirro is having a hard time getting indictments in D.C. for violent criminals.
Right.
But the Eastern District of Virginia is not much better, right? So it's full of Democrats, including government workers, and so you have a Biden judge, you have a Democrat jury pool. It's going to be a tough case.
Okay, tell us about the prosecutor in Virginia, Lindsay Halligan. She's in the news now. She just got installed by President Trump out there. Do you know Miss Halligan? What can you tell us? The reporting is that she went into the grand jury personally and asked them for the indictment and got it.
Yeah, I know Lindsay, and I like her a lot. She's a bold and fearless warrior, as we just saw. Look, we have we have the uniparty in D.C., as you know, Scott, and even the Republicans in D.C., particularly the Republican lawyers in D.C., are cowards. And it took someone like Lindsay to go in there and bring justice. And she's I like her a lot. She's a young lawyer. She was one of President Trump's attorneys. She worked before that. She was in the staff secretary's office, which is a really important office. It's those are the people, as you know, Scott, who decide. They're oftentimes lawyers. Will Sharf is the staff secretary, and Lindsay worked for Will, and they're the ones who have to decide what the president sees and what he doesn't see for his sign off on key matters. Brett Kavanaugh was the staff secretary, and now he's a Supreme Court justice, and she's been Trump's lawyer in the past. I think she's great for this job. You need someone as the U.S. attorney who has good political judgment, good legal judgment, and who's going to implement the Trump Justice Department's policies.
I have been watching all the weeping and gnashing of teeth going on from all the usual suspects. A reporter actually asked President Trump on the South Lawn today if he was worried that in the future a Democratic administration might prosecute some of his people. Trump, of course, punted that question into the sun. But I do want to ask you about the allegation of weaponization. Do you reject that allegation? How do you answer that? And can you tell us in an indictment like this, when you have an investigation like this, how does it get from soup to nuts, from beginning through the internal process at DOJ and to a point where a grand jury says, yep, we agree, charges are warranted?
Look, every indictment has a political element to it because the U.S. attorney has to make a decision whether to bring the indictment or not. And you look at many different factors. You look at what the person did, what law that violated, how that affects the community, what would be the political repercussions if you brought an indictment, what would be the political repercussions if you didn't bring an indictment. So, yes, I mean, our criminal justice system does have a political component to it. With James Comey, am I happy that he got indicted? Absolutely. And for me, I think it's purely retribution. And I think retribution is a crucial component of justice because it restores the victims and it also serves as a powerful deterrent, right? So I hope these Democrats understand that they ran unprecedented Republican lawfare against President Trump, where they tried to bankrupt him for non-fraud. They indicted him 4 different times, tried to throw him in prison for the rest of his life for non-crimes. They tried to throw him off the ballot unconstitutionally in Colorado and Maine and elsewhere. President Biden underfunded Trump's Secret Service protection twice, said Trump was the gravest threat to democracy, and to put a bullseye on Trump and almost got Trump's head blown off twice. And so I think that's bringing much needed accountability to these lawfare Democrats is crucially important. It's going to serve as a powerful deterrent. So these Democrats never try to do this again.
Now, I read the indictment, and in the indictment, it says person 3. The allegation, I guess, is that Comey told person 3, which I assume is Andrew McCabe, to leak information to the media and then lied to, as you said, Ted Cruz on the Senate Judiciary Committee about it. In the trial, do you expect the prosecutors here to say, okay, we're putting Andrew McCabe up here as a witness and put him under oath and force him to answer the question, did Jim Comey order you to do this? Is that how this will go down? I mean, it doesn't sound all that complicated here. You have evidence, you have testimony, and then you have McCabe. Is that about what you've got here?
I think it's a pretty clean case. It's simple, just like you said. Did he tell McCabe to do this, and what did he tell the Senate Judiciary Committee? McCabe has his own credibility problems. He's been caught lying before, and I think that Comey's defense attorneys are going to have to they're going to have to go after McCabe's credibility on this in order to defend their clients, and they should. That's what lawyers do. Like I said, if this were in the if this were a prosecution in the Southern District of Texas or somewhere outside of Washington, D.C., this would be a slam dunk case. You never know what's going to happen in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. You just have a different jury pool.
So you think more charges are coming for Comey? And I think a question that many people have is, who's next? Who else is on the block to be held accountable here? What's your prediction on that?
I have very publicly, for the last 3 years since the Mar-a-Lago raid and my over 5,000 media hits, called for accountability for what happened on the Russian collusion hoax and Crossfire Hurricane. And I have very publicly called for the Southern District of Florida in Miami, the U.S. Attorney's Office down there, to open up a criminal probe, a special grand jury in Fort Pierce to investigate all of the Crossfire Hurricane conspiracy going back to 2016. And it would be in Fort Pierce because that's where they did the Mar-a-Lago raid to get back the Crossfire Hurricane records from President Trump that he was allowed to have under the Presidential Records Act. And I would say to Obama, Biden, Hillary, Comey, Brennan, Clapper, Jay Bratt, Weissman, Jack Smith, Benny Willis, Alvin Bragg, Tish James, Chris Mays in Arizona, Nathan Wade. There are so many people who are part of this conspiracy against President Trump going back to 2016. And I think the lawfare against President Trump over the last 3 years was to take him out politically so he can never get back into the White House and expose this crossfire hurricane conspiracy. I think that every one of those people I just named and many others should lawyer up, because I think that they are going to be called to testify before the grand jury.
He's Mike Davis. He's from Iowa. He's my old friend. We did work in the White House together under President George W. Bush. And in Washington, D.C., folks, they call him the Viceroy. You won't find a lawyer in Washington who's more of a bulldog or who has more of a pulse of what's going on in the legal community in Washington, D.C. Mike, where do we find Article 3 on the internet?
I appreciate it, Scott. Scott used to be my boss to your listeners. It's Article
30.
That was an impossible job to try to control this wild animal, but it was Article3project.org. Article number 3project.org. You can follow us on social media, sign up for our listserv, donate, but only what you can afford. I really appreciate it, Scott.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for all the work you're doing. When we come back, Dinesh D'Souza, our friend here at Salem Radio Network, is here to talk about his latest film called The Dragon's Prophecy. You're going to want to see it. It's common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings on the Salem Radio.
Common sense for the American people. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network. Return from break in 3 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 1 minute and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return in 1 minute. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 45 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
The voice of reason, common sense for the American people. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
Our friend Dinesh D'Souza is here in just a moment, but first, a quick word from our friends at Relief Factor. They want you to meet Bob, who is 60 years old, and he has spent 40 years as a body man and a car painter. Now, Bob wrote us and said, I could barely walk. I couldn't make it up the stairs. By day 4 or 5 of taking Relief Factor, I felt the change. After 8 days on Relief Factor, I was 75% better. I am comfortable now, and I am thoroughly impressed. That's a real-life Relief Factor customer named Bob. We're taking it in the Jennings household. We like it. Everybody's doing it, and everybody likes it. These are transformations that cannot be ignored. If you're living with daily aches and pains, Relief Factor might be the real deal for you. My advice, get on the 3-week quick start. Try it out, relieffactor.com, or call 1-800-4RELIEF. Dinesh D'Souza is with us. Dinesh, first of all, so honored to have you on our program. It's our first time having you on, and it won't be the last. You've got a brand new movie coming out called The Dragon's Prophecy. It's based on a book by Jonathan Cahn. Tell us, what is The Dragon's Prophecy, and when and how can we see this amazing film?
The Dragon's Prophecy refers to a passage in the book of Revelation, Revelation 12, where the dragon, representing the devil, attacked a woman representing Israel, and the woman is in fact pregnant with child representing the Messiah. So this is a kind of a cosmic battle, and we use this lens, this biblical lens, to try to understand October 7th, Israel, Hamas, radical Islam, but we also have an element of biblical archaeology and also biblical prophecy. So there's a lot of heat around this debate. We're trying to add some biblical light, but we're also trying to authenticate the Bible by showing that the personalities and events of the Bible, figures like King David and Jeremiah and the prophet Isaiah, these are not mythical figures who were made up centuries later. These are real people, and the Bible is talking about real events. So this is a fascinating departure for me. My earlier films have mainly been about America, the meaning of America in one way or another. But in this case, I'm looking at something very big happening in the world, the unfolding of biblical prophecy and its relevance for each of us.
So it says here that The Dragon's Prophecy will have a limited release on October 6th and on October 8th, and then it will be streaming on the Salem Now website on October 9th. And on the website for The Dragon's Prophecy, we'll have locations, and you can get your tickets there. You know, one thing in the trailer that jumped out to me, Dinesh, was the archaeological piece. And I think someone in the trailer says there's not a single bit of archaeological evidence that's ever contradicted the stories and the word of the Bible. And so I think, you know, I've been to Israel recently, and that was one thing that jumped out from my trip, going through the city of David, going through the archaeological sites, and you match what you're hearing and the evidence that you can hold in your own hand with what we know from our Bible. It's really powerful for Christians, and I'm sure it will be in this movie for people all over the world.
You know, one of the points that Jonathan Cahn makes that I think is a real contribution is he says the battle between Israel and Hamas is an eerie recreation, he calls it a resurrection, of battles between the ancient Israelites in the Bible and some of their kind of classic enemies, such as the Philistines. If you look at a figure like Samson out of the Bible, he represents the strength of Israel. And guess what? He's captured by the Philistines. They blind him in much the same way that Israel was blinded on October 7th. They drag him to Gaza. The Philistines were headquartered in Gaza, which is now what we call the Gaza Strip. And the Bible says that people wanted Samson to be stripped of his clothes, and they said, bring out Samson so we can be entertained by him. And right after October 7th, Of course, Hamas parades the captives that they took from Israel. They stripped them down, and people are rejoicing and celebrating Allahu Akbar. So all of this is a way of saying that October 7 wasn't just a kind of historic event or terrorist event. It was a kind of biblical event. And when you look at it from that light, in some ways, you immediately begin to see the relevance of all this as kind of a cosmic battle for the human soul, and each of us is implicated in it.
30.
That voice you're hearing is Dinesh D'Souza. You know him here on the Salem Radio Network. He has an important film coming out on October 6th and then the 8th and streaming on Salem on October the 9th. It's called The Dragon's Prophecy. And if you are interested in the events of October the 7th and how they fit into the larger spiritual battle, and I think the fight for the future of Western civilization, you're going to want to see this movie, The Dragon's Prophecy. Join us again Monday, another week in the books. It's Scott Jennings here on the Salem Radio Network.
Fighting for free speech and Western civilization. This is the Scott Jennings Show.